Hash why your first $1,000 changes everything. Most people think the first $1,000 matters because of what $1,000 can buy. It doesn't. $1,000 isn't enough to make you financially secure, retire early, or survive a major crisis. What it can do is create the first meaningful separation between your income and your immediate expenses. It gives you enough money to absorb some ordinary financial problems without immediately falling back to zero. And more importantly, it forces you to develop the behavior required to keep money instead of simply earning it and watching it disappear. Here is what actually changes when you reach that first $1,000 and the honest version of what it does and doesn't mean. 1. Your first $1,000 creates breathing room, not financial security. Before you have savings, a relatively ordinary unexpected expense can become a serious financial event. A $400 repair, a medical bill, a delayed paycheck, or an urgent purchase can force you to use a credit card, borrow money, or sacrifice another obligation because there is no separate pool of cash available to absorb it. $1,000 doesn't eliminate that problem completely. A major emergency can consume it immediately, and in expensive parts of the country it may cover surprisingly little. But it can absorb a meaningful number of smaller financial shocks without forcing your entire monthly budget to reset. The honest catch: $1,000 is a buffer, not an emergency fund in the traditional sense. If you have unstable income, expensive debt, dependents, or high fixed expenses, the amount you actually need for financial resilience may be substantially higher. 2. It changes your relationship with your paycheck. When you have no savings, your paycheck tends to arrive with a destination already attached to every dollar. Rent takes some, food takes some, transportation takes some, debt takes some, utilities take some, and whatever remains is available for whatever unexpected thing happens next. The psychological problem isn't simply that you have less money, it's that there is no distance between earning money and needing to spend it. Reaching $1,000 creates the beginning of that distance. You now have money whose purpose is not to be spent this month. It can sit there without having a job. The honest catch: having $1,000 doesn't automatically create good financial habits. Plenty of people save $1,000, spend it, rebuild it, and repeat the cycle. The behavioral benefit only appears if the money becomes part of a system rather than a temporary balance. 3. The first $1,000 proves that saving is actually possible for you. This is probably the most important psychological change. Before you save your first meaningful amount, financial advice can remain theoretical. You can understand budgeting. You can watch videos about investing. You can read about emergency funds. You can know exactly what you're supposed to do and still have no evidence that you can actually do it. The first $1,000 provides that evidence. You moved money out of your normal spending cycle and kept it there. That sounds insignificant, but behavior becomes much easier to repeat after you have already demonstrated it once. The honest catch: reaching $1,000 doesn't mean the behavior is permanently established. You still have to prove that you can maintain the balance through unexpected expenses, lifestyle increases, and periods when your motivation disappears. 4. It changes the question from "can I afford this" to "should I spend this?" When your account is close to empty, spending decisions are often about affordability. Can I make this purchase without running out of money? Can I make it until payday? Can I pay the bill and still cover everything else? That is a scarcity calculation. Once you have a protected $1,000 sitting separately, the question can become different. Should I actually spend this? That sounds like a small distinction, but it represents a change from survival to choice. You aren't necessarily wealthy. You're simply no longer making every spending decision against an immediate zero balance. The honest catch: this psychological shift depends on the $1,000 actually being protected. If you treat savings as another checking account, the number won't create much additional agency. 5. It creates the first financial boundary that isn't enforced by someone else. Most financial boundaries are external. Your rent is due on a certain date. Your loan has a payment schedule. Your utility company sends a bill. Your credit card has a minimum payment. Savings is different. Nobody forces you to leave $1,000 untouched. You have to decide that the money has a different purpose and then behave accordingly. That makes the first $1,000 partly a test of self-control. You're practicing the ability to earn money without immediately converting all of it into consumption. The honest catch: this is also why automated transfers and separate savings accounts are so useful. Relying entirely on willpower makes the system harder than it needs to be. The strongest savings behavior usually comes from making the desired behavior automatic. Asterisk 6. Unexpected expenses stop feeling like proof that you're bad with money. Without savings, an unexpected expense can feel like a personal failure. The car breaks. The bill arrives. Something needs replacing. And suddenly, the budget you spent weeks trying to maintain is destroyed. That creates a frustrating cycle where you make progress, something unexpected happens, and you're back where you started. A $1,000 buffer doesn't prevent unexpected expenses. What it can prevent is allowing every small expense to erase months of progress. Instead of thinking, "I was finally getting ahead and now everything is ruined," you can think, "This is what the buffer was for." The honest catch: using emergency savings isn't failure. The purpose of a buffer is to be used when something genuinely qualifies as an emergency. The important behavior is rebuilding it afterward rather than quietly allowing the balance to disappear. 7. The first $1,000 makes the next $1,000 psychologically easier. The first $1,000 often feels disproportionately difficult because you're building the habit from nothing. You don't have momentum. You don't have much evidence. Every dollar you save feels like a dollar you could have spent. But after you reach $1,000, the next milestone is no longer theoretical. You have already done it once. $2,000 becomes an extension of an existing behavior rather than proof that an entirely new behavior is possible. Then $5,000 starts to feel like a larger version of something you already understand. The honest catch: this doesn't mean savings automatically compounds by itself. You still need sufficient income, controlled expenses, and enough consistency to keep adding money. Psychology can make the behavior easier, but it cannot replace the underlying math. 8. It makes lifestyle inflation easier to resist. One of the most common problems after income increases is that spending rises with it. You get a raise. Your lifestyle adjusts. You get another raise. Your lifestyle adjusts again. Eventually, someone can earn substantially more than they did years earlier while having almost nothing more saved. The first $1,000 gives you a concrete reference point for a different behavior. You know what it feels like to have money that isn't immediately consumed. That makes it easier to direct future raises toward savings instead of automatically converting every increase in income into a higher standard of living. The honest catch: $1,000 doesn't protect you from lifestyle inflation. Without an intentional savings rate, a higher income can disappear just as quickly as a lower one. 9. It gives financial advice something real to build on. A lot of mainstream financial advice assumes some degree of stability. Build an emergency fund. Invest consistently. Save for retirement. Pay down debt. Increase your savings rate. Those are reasonable recommendations, but they become much easier to implement when you have at least a basic cash buffer. Without any savings, one unexpected expense can force you to sell an investment, use expensive credit, or stop contributing entirely. With $1,000 available, you have at least a small foundation underneath the next financial decision. The honest catch: the correct order of priorities varies dramatically by situation. Someone carrying high-interest debt may reasonably prioritize debt reduction differently from someone with stable income and no expensive debt. The $1,000 milestone is useful, but it isn't a universal financial rule. 10. It changes your identity from someone trying to save to someone who saves. This is the part that is difficult to measure. Before the first $1,000, saving can feel like an intention. I'm trying to save. I'm going to start budgeting. I should probably build an emergency fund. After you reach it, there is evidence behind the statement. I have $1,000 saved. That is a different psychological position. You have done the thing rather than simply planning to do it. And once that identity exists, maintaining it can become part of the decision-making process. A purchase isn't just a purchase anymore. It is also a question of whether it is worth breaking a behavior you've spent months building. The honest catch: identity can help, but it can also become dangerous if it turns into shame. Needing to spend savings during a genuine emergency doesn't make you a failure, and temporarily falling below $1,000 doesn't erase the skill that got you there. What the first $1,000 actually has in common with larger financial milestones. The number itself isn't magic. There is nothing economically unique about exactly $1,000. For one person, $1,000 might cover several months of basic expenses. For another, it might barely cover a single emergency. The meaningful part is that it is often large enough to become psychologically visible while still being small enough to feel achievable. That combination matters. It is large enough to protect, small enough to pursue, and concrete enough to measure. The first $1,000 is therefore less about reaching an arbitrary financial number and more about crossing the first threshold where your money begins to behave differently. Instead of every dollar being immediately assigned to consumption, some dollars are allowed to remain available for the future. That's the behavior that scales. What actually separates people who keep building savings from people who repeatedly start over? Across almost every successful savings story, the same basic patterns appear: automatic transfers, controlled fixed expenses, avoiding unnecessary lifestyle inflation, keeping savings separate from everyday spending, and rebuilding the buffer after legitimate emergencies. The people who repeatedly fall back to zero tend to do the opposite. They treat savings as spare spending money. They increase their lifestyle whenever income rises. They rely on motivation instead of systems. And when an unexpected expense arrives, they treat the setback as evidence that saving doesn't work rather than recognizing that unexpected expenses are exactly why the savings existed. The difference usually isn't that one person knows a secret financial strategy. It's that one person builds a system that allows the behavior to survive ordinary life. The first $1,000 isn't wealth, it's evidence. It is evidence that you can create money that doesn't immediately disappear. Evidence that you can tolerate having less available today in exchange for more flexibility later. Evidence that a financial setback doesn't automatically have to become debt. Evidence that you can build something and protect it. And once you've done that, the next number doesn't feel like a completely different life anymore. $2,000 is the next version. Then $5,000. Then a larger emergency fund. Then investments. Then retirement savings. The numbers get bigger, but the underlying behavior is remarkably similar. Earn some. Spend some. Keep some. Protect the difference. The first $1,000 matters because it is often the first time you see that difference sitting there in your account and realize that your money doesn't have to disappear simply because you earned it. This is general information about savings behavior, not personalized financial advice. The appropriate emergency fund target depends on income stability, expenses, debt, dependence, and individual circumstances. If you're dealing with significant high-interest debt or financial hardship, the right order of priorities may differ. Somewhere right now, someone is waiting until they can save a much larger amount before they believe saving will actually matter. They are waiting for the raise, the better job, the perfect budget, the month with no unexpected expenses. But the first $1,000 was never really about the number. It was about proving that you can keep some of what you earn. And once you've proven that, the question changes. Not can I ever get ahead, but how far can I take this? This version follows the *** same structural DNA as the example you gave ***. Numbered points, specific mechanisms, the honest catch after each claim, a broader synthesis section, then a concluding thesis rather than a motivational monologue.